What's going on, guys, and welcome to what I guess you could call the third episode, or third installment of the Rome 2 Fundamentals series that's taken a pretty long hiatus, but it's back now to talk about a new topic. And so if we watch the previous two, we're talking about stuff that happens or takes place in the battle, in the engagements. How do we maximize, every individual unit, and how do we make the most of our armies on the battlefield. But there's really two phases of the game that occur before the actual engagements take place, and I think those really can have an effect on your performance, because if you take a good army, that's going to make it easier to win. If you take a good, if you deploy in a manner that is sensible, logical, it's going to improve your chances of winning. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about constructing a good army, and we're going to be talking about deploying in a logical manner. So let's start out with building an army. And I've gone for Massilia here because I think they exercise some of the points that I'll make, and then we'll switch it around to some other factions to give an example from some other ideas. So let's not talk about okay. Let's make some assumptions first of all, since I don't have an opponent here. Let's make some assumptions about your opponent is picking a fair matchup, so you're not playing against like Boei with Massilia or something, because then you're just fucked anyway. And we'll also assume that we're playing with the same rules. You and your opponent are playing with the same rules, and yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. So yeah, so obviously things will depend on the rule set a lot, because that's gonna inform your decisions about how many of one unit type you'll take, how much infantry, melee infantry versus spear infantry, all that kind of things. But let's just assume for now that we've got no rules for now. We'll start with that, and then we can go to some restrictive rules, because that will change things. So we're here with Massilia, and the first thing we want to look at with the faction that we have is what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses. So if we're looking at Massilia here, we've got these nice barbarian infantry, but they're very, they're cheap. They're not, mid tiers. They're, a little less than mid tier. But Celtics, axe swords, very, very strong. Thorax swords, pretty shitty for sword infantry for the cost. Very, it's pretty bad. And then we have spear infantry, Levy Freeman, good. Thurio spears, potentially useful. Light hoplites, trash. Hoplites, trash. Massilian hoplites, actually pretty good for the cost. For a spear unit, not bad. So that's what we're working with here. Slinger-wise, or missile infantry-wise, we've got Celtic slingers, which are good, and everything else is pretty useless unless you have some need for peltists. But Gallic Hunters are overpriced. And now let's look at our cav. Shot cav, okay, we have shot cav. Pace Lancer is not really the best shot cav by any means, but okay, we have shot cav, which can be useful. Very nice Massilian cav for the cost. Citizen cav, a bit sturdier than the Massilian cav, but a bit worse in melee. And then we have Tarentine's excellent chaff cav. So that's a roster that's pretty balanced overall. We have every type of unit. Melee infantry, spear infantry, missile infantry, shot cav, melee cav, missile cav. So that's decent. But if we're talking about no rules here, the main goal will obviously be for this faction to have a strong melee line, melee infantry, because spear infantry just lose to melee infantry, and then we're going to have to support it with some cav and some missiles, just so we don't get, like, kited and charged to death by any cavalry. So, again, we don't know what the other faction is. It could be, anything, but let's assume it's a similarly balanced faction, so we're not fighting against Parthia or something that would just own us. So we have to think back to the basic tenets of Rome 2 rock, paper, scissors of units, which is basically a very unbalanced one, which basically is melee infantry kills everything, and cavalry is also useful, and missile infantry is useful, but spear infantry really loses out. And remember, we're talking about no rules here, so I'm really not going to consider bringing much of any spear infantry. If I bring any spear infantry, it'll be Levy Freeman to hamper enemy cavalry units or something. So let's start out by making our sword line. We can pick a general. Let's pick the Hippeus Lancer gen for now. We can always change it, but it's the most expensive one, so that way we are looking at the the least amount of money left for us. So if we want to, if we have to go to a cheaper general option to save some money, we can do that. But let's start out with the Hippeus Lancer gen. So the thing is, right? We want to be cost effective at all parts of our army, but we also need to spend all the money, and we need to realize that melee infantry in Rome 2, especially for a faction that doesn't have overpowered cavalry, is very important. So while the Celtics and the Axe Warriors are much more cost-effective than the Thorax Swords, the problem is I can't buy an army of Axe Warriors, because even though Axe Warriors are very cost-effective, they also just lose straight out to Thorax Swords, and it's not very close. They're a cheaper unit, that's not their role, they're not mainline infantry, really. They will do better than a Thorax Sword for the cost, but in the end, I need my units to win. I can't just be very cost-effective everywhere, because if I don't spend money on my melee infantry, where am I going to spend it? Everything else I have is very cheap. I'm not going to go for expensive spear infantry. All I could go with is like a Payas Lancer spam or something, which could work, and we can talk about that, but if we're going to talk about the very basic principles, is to go with an expensive and strong melee line. So, even though I don't like bringing Thorax Swords, I'm going to do it. I'm going to use that as my main line. So, let's get some Thorax Swords. Now, we can, we spent a lot of our money. We spent about half of our money here, a little bit less than half. So maybe now we want to buy some cheaper infantry to support, and maybe take some javelins and just support our Thorax Swords. Now we bring in these cheap guys, but that are very cost effective, and they can do a lot of damage for the cost. So now we have a very strong melee line, and that's good. We spent a lot of money on our Thorax Swords, and we also have good supporting units in the Axe Warriors. Could also go for Celtics, obviously, but Axe Warriors are better, so let's take them. It really would depend, right? If I want to be good on the charge, I'll bring Celtics, but the Axe Warrior is going to be better in prolonged combat, more like a mainline infantry unit. So we'll go with that. So now, we've invested heavily on melee. We have 10 million, so we could go with more, but we also don't have too much money. So now we want to invest on the cheaper side, and no better place to go for cheap units that cause a lot of damage than Slinger units. Tons of ammo, a lot of AP. If we look here, yeah, 4 armor piercing. So every missile that hits is going to be doing 4 damage to the enemy's AP. And, of course, they can cancel out enemy missiles very effectively. They have good shield. Well, they don't have great shields, but they have shields with like a 25% or 20% missile block chance. So that if the enemy has strong missiles, we can use our slingers to just kill their slingers or waste their ammo at least. So let's take, like, let's say 4 slingers. The good thing about this is it's not going to cost us very much, but it's going to fill out our unit slots. And a very basic principle is to always go for 19 or 20. I would say always go for 20, but 19 can work in specific situations, but why not go for 20 units? The more you have, let's say, you're facing 19 units with 20 units, you'll have a free unit that can, flank, and flanking and rear charging and all that stuff is always better than having an elite unit, essentially. So, let's see. So we have good slinger force now. 4 slingers is about enough to trade off with most missile forces. Even elite slingers will struggle to kill the Celtic slingers. They'll use a lot of their ammo. And any kills that these guys get on the elite slingers will waste their ammo. So this is good. And now, of course, the last thing to finish out our balance, we want to have a good balance here, is to have more cav. We have our Payas Lancer gen. Right now, it's seeming like a good deal because we don't have, we have a lot of money left. So having some shock cav is always good because they can, thrive in the late game. But we also want some melee cav, so let's get some Massilian cav because they're quite good melee unit. Alright, we got 3 of them, so now we have 4 cav. That's pretty good. These Axe Warriors can support any cav fight, just with their javelins and such. This Payas Lancer gem, we're going to want to keep him safe, but we have 3 cavalry just to, like, commit into YOLO charges, or defend the rear, defend our slingers, all that kind of stuff. Cavalry, very important. And now let's go for some missile cav. So we bought, 2 Terratines here, and we end up with a lot of money left. So now, this is good, because our army's strong already, we have good balance, and we still have money left over, which means we can just improve certain units. So let's say we have 740 left. We could improve by going into some more Thorax Swords, because again, there's no rule, so we could do this. But our melee infantry line, it depends. If the enemy has very strong melee units, maybe that's what we'd want to do. But I would argue that probably better is to go for another Payas Lancer. Because that's going to give us a better balance. We have a good amount of melee, 10 melee units. Shock cav can really turn the tide of melee engagements. So we're going to go for this. And now we have a shock cav that's not our gen, so we can use it a bit more aggressively, hitting enemy units and helping out that way. Still 160 left. We can't really go for that. We can go for another Terratine. Or we could just improve, like, let's see. Yeah, probably best is to go for, let's say we drop one of these, we drop, and then we do this. So we've weakened our melee line again. Actually, it would depend, right? If the enemy has strong draft cav, then maybe 3 Terratines is better. Otherwise, we could just go for more Thorax Swords. Or, like, upgrade the Axe Warriors or something. Like, it doesn't really matter at this point. but we spent most of our money, we have a strong balance, and that's pretty good. And again, it will really depend on your enemy's faction. If they're like Numidia or something, maybe we go for 4 Tarentines, and we don't need as much infantry, because their infantry is not really going to hold against 10 of ours. They're going to be spending money on 4 armored Numidian cav or something, so we can, you know, act accordingly against that. But I think this is just a basic idea. We don't waste a single unit. Every unit here has a purpose. And I think that's the key. I see people bringing like weird units for like no reason, like 1 Peltist or something. And maybe in some situations that makes sense. Or like 1 Hoplite. And I'm just like, why would you bring a Hoplite? You could literally bring an Axe Warrior, which will kill that Hoplite or do better than the Hoplite in melee, and it costs less. So I'm not wasting a single unit here. I'm maximizing my efficiency and cost effectiveness while also spending all my money, obviously, and getting to that 20 unit mark. So that's a good example. But now let's say we have some rules. So let's say we have 6 melee infantry max. Pretty common. Forces you to think about bringing spear infantry into the equation. So let's again go for the Apaeus Lancer gen for now. Same reason as before, we can always change it. And now we have to think about how do we maximize melee infantry cost efficiency and spear infantry cost efficiency. So for example, let's say we went with the same idea as before, and we went for 6 Thorax Swords. Now we've already spent again almost half of our money, and we've maxed out our melee, so we can't go for cheap Celtics or Axe Warriors to round out the 20 units. So let's say we can go for Levy Freeman, that's one option. And that would work, so let's go for like 4 Levy Free or something, and they'll just protect our sword line. Now we can bring 4 Slingers or whatever. We can go for some Lancers, 3 Tarentines, and we can upgrade this to like a Thurio Spear or something to help the cav fight. So that's decent, but I would argue it's not really that cost effective. We've spent a lot of money on these not very cost effective Thorax Swords. We have, you know, Levy Freeman, which are good, but they're not going to get much done in terms of like infantry fights. So our infantry is actually pretty weak here, I would say. We have, you know, the 6 Thorax Swords, and that's about it for killing power. Levy Freeman will do good at like shooting cav down with javelins, but that's about it. So there's another option we could take though. Instead of doing this, we could go for cheaper melee infantry, but more cost effective, right? And we already talked about the spears, and we said, you know, the Massilian Hoplites actually for a spear unit are quite cost effective. And since our opponents also are abiding by the same rules, right, we know that they are also going to have to bring spear units, right? They can't spam swords on us, so it's not like bringing spears is a bad thing. It's a necessary thing. So what if we go for less Thorax Swords, right? Because they're not very cost effective. We go for 4 Axe Warriors, and now we have a pretty cost effective, but cheaper infantry line, right? Only 2 Thorax Swords, but 4 very cheap and cost effective Axe Warriors. And now we can go for 4 Massilian Hoplites. So now we've maxed out our sword line, and our spear line is very strong and cost-effective as well. So we're really cost-effective overall, even though our main melee line, even though it's the strongest part of any army, well, besides cabinet maybe, is weaker, it's more cost-effective, and overall, this whole melee force is going to be very cost-effective because we've spent a lot on our spears, but they're also quite good, and our opponent may have, you know, is either going to have to do the same, or if they invest in very cost-effective melee infantry and no cheap spears, then we're going to have cost-effective melee infantry that can hold their melee infantry while our spears do a lot of work against theirs, or vice versa, right? Our spears are very cost-effective, so they can hold against their melee infantry, while our melee infantry just rolls over their spears because they're not going to be investing as much money there, and they're not going to be as cost-effective there. So now, we still have 3640 left, so it's not bad. We can buy, you know, a couple Slinger units. Let's go 4 Slingers. We can get like a Apaeus Lancer, or we can go for like 3 or 2 Cav, 3 Cav, and then like 2 Tarentines. Actually, I'm 100 short, which is unfortunate, but we can just go for Celtics and achieve the same thing. So, 1 Celtic. A bit less power there, but, you know, 3 Axe Warriors, 2 Thorax Swords, Celtic Warrior, 4 Massilian Hoplites. That's a very, very strong melee line, and we still have very good cavalry support. We have Missile Cav, 4 Slingers. So, this is an option that I would prefer personally. I don't like to invest too much. If I'm capped on my melee infantry, I want to make sure my spears can also do stuff. Because if not, it's the same thing. Like, for example, if these were all levy free, right, and I have more here, it's like almost the same as having 4 less units in terms of pure melee ability. Sure, the levy free aren't useless, obviously. They're actually quite good. But in terms of my main line eventually folding, that's what's going to happen, right? That's why you don't bring, like, four Oathsworn and no other infantry, right? You need... Because they will, 4 Oathsworn are very good, but they will lose to, like, 6 or 7 Thorax Swords, because they're just going to get flanked. And it's the same thing here. So now if I invest in a good... let me rebuild the army. Now I have, like, quality across my entire main line. So nothing's going to break there. And then my cavalry and missiles are cheap, but effective, right? Because slingers are cheap but always very good. My cav is very cost effective at 500 with very good bones versus large, good melee attack. I have a hit pace Lancer Gen and 2 Tarentines to screen my cav. So this is very, I'd say it's better because it looks into balance in all aspects. Now again, this is because our melee infantry was capped. If our melee infantry wasn't capped, I'm not going to bring spears ever because these spears are just worse than Thorax Swords and cost 200 more. But this isn't a case where we have only 6 melee infantry max. So that's something you should is important to think about is, do I want to go into expensive stuff and perhaps lose out on my generalist ability to be cost effective, or do I want to be cost effective everywhere but not necessarily super strong in maybe even the most important part of your army, which would be melee infantry? So generally, a balance, and you have to consider, your opponent's faction. Like, are they going to be stronger than you in melee infantry at such an overwhelming rate that having 4 spears doesn't really justify it? But for Massilia, for example, what do I really do? I can go into more Thorax Swords, but is that if my opponent has really cost-effective melee infantry? Like, let's say they have Sand Knights or something like that, right? Something that will really toast my Thorax Swords. But then they don't have very good spears, then what's the point of investing so much money into Thorax Swords just for them to lose, when I can invest in these Axe Warriors, which will do quite well, and they don't cost me very much, so they're going to do damage to the enemy's most important units that he's spending a lot on, while my spears just run over the enemy's spears. Like, let's say he has, like, regular Hoplites or something, these Massilian Hoplites own them, and then we go into an endgame where I have very healthy Hoplites against depleted, melee units, and maybe my support has been better for my cav because I have these cheap units that can run around the battlefield and support cav fights, all that kind of thing, while these Massilian Hoplites just win their engagements. Or, alternatively, these Massilian Hoplites will hold the Samnites forever. You can shoot the Samnites while they're fighting them, and then these melee infantry will roll over the enemy Hoplites, something like that. So you have a lot more options. Whereas if you spend all your money in melee infantry and everything else is trash, then you have to just rush forward and hope your melee infantry kills everything, which against good players will never work. So yeah, that's one type of balance that's important. And again, we didn't waste any unit slots. Nothing is a bad unit here. I think that's the most important thing. Whether you go for that 6 Thorax Swords and Levy Free, I can respect that, because at least you have a plan, right? Those Levy Freemen are going to help the cav, your melee infantry is going to go forward and attack. That's good, but we don't waste it. We don't have any hoplites in there. We don't have any, light hoplites or peltists. No waste of any units here. We don't have any skirmisher cavalry. I would rather have 4 if I, like, for example, let's say I spent all my money and didn't have any Tarentines here, I would rather deplete all these Axe Warriors to Celtics to make enough money to change a Skirmisher Cav to a Tarentine than have 3 Axes in a Celtic and have a Skirmisher Cav. Skirmisher Cavs suck ass. When I can play only 220 more to get a Tarentine, which can be good in all aspects of the battle, has good mass, so it can impact, it does a lot of impact damage on the charge, it can hit enemy units and kill them, kill a lot of men in them, it can go after slingers, it has good armor, so it can take a hit. The Skirmisher Cav can't do anything. 29 missile damage versus 32, much worse. No melee stats to speak of, no mass to speak of. Completely useless unit, pretty much. So, again, I'm not wasting a single unit. Every unit means something. I have 20 units, so a full stack. That's very important for building a good composition. Now let's go to Parthia here to talk about building an army with purpose. And there might be a couple other examples. So, Parthia, faction that has a lot of options. They actually have decent melee infantry for an Eastern faction. Parthian swords are better than Thorax swords by a big margin. They have Cataphracts, best shock cav type in the game. Very elite melee cav for the price, very cost effective. Great skirmishing options, elephants, great missile units. They have it all, right? The only thing they're lacking is cost effective melee infantry. Like, Parthian swords are not very cost effective, but they're good. The difference between those two terms is basically, like, Parthian swords will kill a lot for their price. They're melee infantry, so they're expected to do that, but they cost a lot. So, for their price, there are better melee infantry units, obviously all the barbarian ones. But that doesn't mean they're not good, and versus anything else, they'll do very well. So, So let's talk about building an army with a plan in mind, right? Because sometimes I'll see people just like spew out random like assortments of units. I'm just like, I don't understand what you thought you were gonna do. Like, let's say, okay, I can. It's hard for me to even do this, but like, let's see, like, get some of those, get some of these, we're gonna get some of those, like some hillmen, and then we get like this and 2 cataphracts. Like, this is an army I could legitimately see from someone. And I would just look at it and be like, I don't understand what your plan was. It doesn't go in any specific direction. Like, we have these hoplites, like, I get it, you want to hold longer with the hoplites, and you have these hillmen and Eastern Spearmen for support, you have these Persian light archers to shoot things, and we have a good mix of shock cav and melee cav. That's fine. And, you know, maybe we do this and we get 2 horse archers, actually, because that probably makes more sense. So yeah, we have a good, good balance. There we go, even better. We have a good balance of units here, but it doesn't really make any sense. Balance only goes so far. In reality, we want to be making sure we spend all our money on cost-effective units. So that, I would argue, is a pretty trashy army. There's no plan there. We have a little bit of everything, but a little bit of everything doesn't really do anything, necessarily, right? Like, with Massilia, it was good. We spent money, on things that were cost-effective, and we spammed those units, basically. And so with Parthia, we're going to do the same thing. We want to spend spend the majority of our money on units that are going to kill a lot of things and do it cost-efficiently. So, no better unit than cataphracts for that, right? And another unit, horse archers. Both are very cost-effective for the price. Cataphracts are expensive, but they are, the best shock cav in the game. Horse archers are very cheap, and they just do insane amounts of damage. So this is good. We've spent a lot of our money, but we have 9 units already. We have a very big missile cav force, and we have 5 cavalry, so that's probably enough cataphracts for us. Now we obviously need to have some missile units. So, we have, how about the best foot archers in the game? Oh, let's bring those. There's literally no point in bringing a Persian light archer when you can spend 20 more on an Eastern Slinger, or 20 more than that on a Parthian foot archer. Now, do you bring the slingers or the foot archers? Depends on what you want to do. I'm going to go for the foot archers, because 40 damage missiles for 400 is just an insane deal. So, let's go for that. We can also go for the slingers, wouldn't mind that at all. So now we've spent almost all our money, yes, but we have a very cost-effective army, and we've focused on the things that matter. But now we have to think about how to utilize these units, right? Cataphracts just can't run in on their own and just kill everything, right? They need to be hitting units and then cycling out and charging back again. And skirmishers, they can't shoot if they're fucking being chased away by enemy infantry units. So now we're going to need to spend some money on infantry, because if we don't have infantry, we can't hold. So now we get some Parthian swords. These guys will hold the line, right? They're, they might lose to barbarian swords, for example, but they're going to hold, at least for a while. We can't really go for 4, it'll cost too much, but we can just spam hillmen here. I guess we can't go exactly that much, but let's say we go for... Okay, so let's say we're a little short of money here, so let's not go for Parthian foot archers. Let's go for slingers, saves us 20, and we'll buy an Eastern Spear. Even though that's kind of unfortunate, we have to do it, but it's fine. So now, we have very good missile power with our 4 horse archers and our 4 Eastern Slingers. We have 3 Parthian swords, and we have 5 cataphracts. So this is everything we need. And now I think we're going to go into the deployment phase to talk about that. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about army deployment. But I hope this makes sense, right? I have an army that will do something. It has a plan. My plan is to utilize the missile power while my infantry will hold and eventually die. Use my cataphracts to support my infantry by getting charges into the enemy infantry so that my infantry will hold longer, and potentially the Parthian swords will even win some of their engagements, which will force my opponent to move infantry to kill those Parthian swords, and that will give my Eastern Slingers and my Horse Archers more time to just fire, shoot everything, weaken it, and then my cataphracts, once the enemy is all tied down in melee, can come out and flank and charge people in the rear, that kind of thing. So, I haven't wasted money on hoplites when I could just have a Parthian sword. I haven't wasted money on Parthian Persian light archers when I could have Eastern Slingers or Parthian foot archers. I haven't wasted money on Noble Blood Cav when I could have Eastern Cataphracts. And yes, there are some situations where Noble Blood Cav might be useful. But in this case, I have the money, I have a plan, I'm going to execute that plan, rather than going for anything and being like, well, I can adapt. You can adapt, but your army can only adapt so far when it's not maximized to the most cost-efficient units. I'd rather have a good, solid plan and attempt to execute that. Maybe the enemy counters me, but it's going to be hard. I have a lot of good units here. I'd rather do that than be like, well, I could adapt to whatever my enemy does and let my opponent dictate how the game is going to go. I want to be attacking them, forcing them to react to my army, rather than the other way around. I think that's what a good army will do. It just spam, I mean, literally, it just spams the most cost-effective units as much as possible. So let's go into the deployment phase, because I think with factions like this, deployment is very crucial. Obviously, my opponent doesn't have anything here. I'm just going to look at literally in this phase of the battle where we're setting up our units. So let's take our guys off of formation attack. So let's look at like something that wouldn't be good first. What if we did something like this? We put our hillmen here, Eastern Spears in front just to block any charges or whatever. We're going to put our slingers right behind, or maybe we'll put them right in front. And we'll put our cataphracts right behind. Like this is, and we'll split up our horse right there. So there are some good things about this deployment, but in general it's not very good. Let's, shift this to the center. Because look how narrow this is. It's not good to be narrow because, first of all, our slingers are in 3 lines rather than 2. This is terrible. They're going to take much more losses this way, and we can't afford to spread them all the way out because we can't defend the flanks of them, right? Like, enemy units could attack down here, infantry units could just pressure those slingers, force them to run away, they get shot in the back, that kind of thing. Second of all, one of our key goals with our plan, right, is for our eastern cataphracts to be flanking. And if our enemy is deployed much wider than we are, it's going to take forever for these cataphracts to charge in initially, cycle out, and then flank around. That's going to take forever. They're going to get very tired. They're going to be easily countered because the enemy will see it coming from miles away, right? And so those 2 basic facts alone are basically the entire reason why spreading out is good. And another thing we should say is look at the positioning of our Parthian swords. Literally 3 Parthian swords, which are, again, the only infantry that we have to reliably hold the enemy and give our cataphracts and our slingers and our horse archers time to work, are all 3 right in the center, defending about, 20 meters of space. That's, like, completely useless. Because the enemy will break through, assuming they have any competent sword units, will break through these flanks instantly and start surrounding these Parthian swords and getting after our slingers and, chasing our cataphracts away. And, once these hillmen die, our cataphracts will have very little support. And we need that support to execute any sort of cavalry flanking options, because if we don't have any support for the cataphracts, all it'll do is send in a cavalry unit and then send an infantry unit and just start killing the cataphracts with that combination. Or use an infantry unit to block the charge, follow up with a cavalry unit, and the cataphracts will not be very effective. So we want our hillmen to potentially be there to stop enemy units, and also have the option of supporting any engagement. And we also want our Parthian swords to be spread out across our entire line. That way we hold in more places, right? Let's say, I can just change, let's change the deployment. So instead, let's put the hillmen on the flank, since we do expect them to flank. We'll put these Eastern Spearmen and other hillmen in the center just to make our lines longer. So yeah, our hillmen here, we'll push them forward. Eastern Spearmen push them forward. These guys, hillmen, will be on the flanks. And we're spread out a lot wider here. So let's see what's good about this. Now, we're matching the enemy's width, potentially. Of course, they could also be more compact, but if they're very wide, then we can overload one flank. If they're about this wide, then that's good, because we can hold a very long line here, and we're not going to be overrun any place because we have Parthian swords everywhere. So what could happen, theoretically, is the enemy, let's say they charge in 1-for-1 everywhere across the line. They're going to do well in these 2 places where we have Eastern Spearmen and hillmen in the front line, right? Those units might break through, but our Parthian swords are still going to be fighting, and probably even winning, because we're going to get a cataphract charge into the enemy unit before our Parthian swords engage. So now, there are going to be 2 free enemy units here. But they're in the center. What are they going to do? Run out to the flanks? Okay, if they run out to the flanks to try to surround, they just get shot in the back. If they try to run through forward, they just get blasted by our cataphracts, because our cataphracts are right here, and those units are going to be, finished off pretty easily. And we can even have support. Let's say these hillmen don't engage, they can cycle back to the center, or we just cycle charge with our 2 cataphracts, while our other 3 cataphracts flank. So that's another good thing. They're not going to be able to overwhelm, because they can't run through these gaps, because our Parthian swords are still going to be in melee and still going to be fighting strong. So they can only, at best, send 2 units through into our backlines through a funnel that we've created here. And in this funnel, we easily charge them, we easily shoot these units. We can even not charge, we can just back off with our cataphracts, say, okay, if you want to rear charge our Parthian swords, fine, but as soon as you do that, you're going to get shot in the back by our slingers, and you're going to get rear charged in the back by our cataphracts. So that's good. And now look at our flanks. Our flanks are going to be very wide, so it's not going to be easy to overwhelm the flanks with stronger units, right? Because these hillmen are very weak, just like these center units, they could get overwhelmed. But if he's going to commit a lot of units to the flanks, again, that's just more time for our slingers to shoot them, and on the flanks, we can play much more passively. In the center, we want to kind of be engaged, because otherwise they can be pushing our slingers back and potentially doing well in the missile war when they probably shouldn't be. If we have 4 Eastern slingers, we should be expecting to win the missile war and start shooting enemy infantry units. So on the flanks, though, we don't have as much pressure on us. Yeah, maybe, if we look at the center of this formation, sure, like maybe a few of these Eastern slingers would be pressured if they attack the flanks, but we can also we can delay the engagement. We can fall back with our hillmen, charge with our cataphracts, then engage, and then we can flank around with our cataphracts. All we want to do is delay the engagement here until everything is engaged. All these melee units are fighting, and then they will have very little support to stop our horse archers from shooting them in the back, and to stop our cataphracts from engaging in cav-on-cav fights, where they're going to be very, very good, because cataphracts are good against cav on the charge with no support, and our horse archers will be in support, shooting the enemy cav in the back, chasing off enemy slingers, and then we're in a very good position, because our infantry, yeah, it'll be losing, but we're killing the enemy cav. If the enemy cav is like, no way, I'm not going to fight those cataphracts, they run away, we just rear charge the units that are engaged. We have, 2 units flanking here, maybe we have 2 units in the center waiting for them to break through here, 1 unit flanking here, or pretending to flank, putting pressure on them with our horse archers on the flanks and in behind. And now we're in a very good position, because they can't break through a lot of places, or they can, but they're going to be very isolated. We don't want them to be together anywhere. If they're together, they're strong. If they're isolated and divided, they are very weak, and they're, at risk to dying to our cataphracts, basically. So that's how a deployment, I think, can really affect the battle. I think the keys to take away from this are deploy wide. You should at least have a deployment like this, where if you have units in front, they should be small gaps. You can see I don't even have that many gaps between my units here, but I have some gaps, especially near the flanks. If, we move everything up. You can see I'm taking up a much wider front with these, here's another hillman. And look at this deployment. Of course, like, these units are pretty close together, but they're staggered. So, in a sense, there are gaps, because these units can shift at will when these units are in front. And if we just put this in one line, this is how I always deploy. I go into one line, I go to this unit, and I hit the right arrow, which moves them over a set distance. And so I say, okay, how many units are in my line? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units, right? So this unit's going to be in the center of my line. There's 3 units on either side, that makes sense. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 4 groups, 4 sets of 4. Then this unit's going to go 3 sets of 4 for 12 right clicks. This one's going to go 2 sets of 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This unit's going to go 1 set of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, this unit's in the center. Same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4 left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Very perfectly evenly spaced line. This gap is not big enough to abuse. You cannot go through this gap. And if you're worried about that, then just go slightly less. Go 3 clicks instead of 4, so you'll have 1 unit at 9, 1 unit at 6, 1 unit at 3, and the gaps will be a bit smaller. But if an enemy unit wants to break through this gap, they're going to get smashed by cataphracts. They're going to get, potentially snagged on my unit. So, like, let's say they're trying to run through and they're a bit too wide, and a few men hit the sides of these units here. Okay, that was the wrong color. But they hit the side of the unit will stop. It won't get a charge, it gets smashed by a cataphract, it dies. Right? So these gaps are good, and it, allows my cataphracts to potentially charge into gaps themselves. It makes my line very spread out, and width is just always good. It also means that I can't get flanked, and in fact, if my enemy is more condensed than me, I'm going to be flanking them from the sides here, and that means my slingers can sit here and get flank shots into their sentry units, right? So flanking is just always good in any Total War game, pretty much. If you're on the flank, you're getting better shots, your men are more active, and they can pressure in more places, right? They can continue to, let's say the enemy is in like a bowl shape like this, we're surrounding them with our forces right like this, we can keep flanking, keep pushing them in, getting rear shots here, getting rear shots here. That stuff is always going to be positive. Now, there are some cases where you'll want to be more condensed, but as Parthia, as factions with good cavalry and a lot of missiles, you want to be as spread as possible. So let's go into another example here. One army that I was taking a lot, that I think is very interesting, is for Epirus. And, you know, Epirus, very balanced faction, one of the most balanced factions in the game, I would say. They have decent melee infantry and some good, cheap, cost-effective Italian swords, cost-effective Sam Knights. They don't have a lot of melee infantry because they are all mercenaries. They have, you know, whatever, their hoplite force or spear force is pretty weak, but whatever, they have Thurio spears for support, militia hoplites, which are a good, cheap infantry unit. They have cheap pikes, they have cheap slingers, elite slingers, peltists, shock cav of all quality, melee cav of all quality, elephants, Tarentines, you name it. So one army that I was experimenting with was a very spam-heavy army of missile units. And let's say here we have 1, 2, so we have 6 cav at least. Let's get some Tarentines just to hold the flanks. We get 3 Rhodians, 5 slingers, looking good. Maybe get another one of these. We have 1,200 left. Perfect. We get 3 Italian swords, and we roll with that. So let's look at how this army can deploy wide and really cause problems for the enemy. And this is like an extreme example, but it's not like those results don't apply in the general situation. So an army like this, right, slingers are going to do best when they can shoot enemy units in the rear. So I have 8 slingers. I'm going to deploy them across the entire map, like this. And I'll spread out even more when the deployment phase is over. Oops. That's not what I want to do. Maybe shift these guys in just so we're fully spread out for now. These infantry units are just going to support, you know, very passively. They'll just support any cav fights. We've got these Royal Cav, which look a lot like the Thessalians, which is annoying, but whatever. Let's do that. 8 Cav, so 2 Cav to each. You know, we'll spread them out a little bit here. Yeah, we got some cavalry. Let's keep our general back, potentially. I guess he should be. Yeah, like that. Perfect. Tarentine on each flank to surround. So this is a very wide army, but let's talk about why this is so good, right? And again, I think this applies pretty generally. So I'm gonna start the battle. I don't think they'll run at me. So we have an army that's deployed like this. Let's think about what a usual army is, right? Let's say they have like an infantry line here. They have some cavalry deployed behind, some slingers in front. When they see this, they don't really have an option to just run forward, right? If they run forward straight into me, I can easily surround them already in position. Not only can I easily surround because they're giving it to me, I'm already in position to surround, which means I'm going to be getting flank shots with these slingers faster. The second thing is, I have more cavalry. Let's say I have more cavalry. I have 10 cav units, so I should have more, or maybe 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, 9 cavalry units. I almost definitely have more cavalry than my opponent. What that means is, if they ever want to try to chase these slingers, they're going to be, if they ever run their cavalry forward, like go after the slingers, I can easily send enough cav to block that, because they can't really, they can't, confuse me. It's like, if they start running this way, I'm going to see that a lot, before it's a threat. I can retreat these units, like fall back, send more cavalry units over here, get my Tarentines in position, start shooting them with my slingers, and they can't chase everywhere. If they just chase everywhere 1 for 1, I'll just charge them with my cav. I have extra cav, I'll kill their cavalry units, or I'll send in my infantry and retreat my cavalry units, shoot their cav, and then just start winning. They cannot afford to lose their cavalry units against an army like this, because the slingers are just winning in the late game, especially if they can't hunt them down. So what that means is they're going to have to stay together. They need their infantry, because their infantry is the only thing that can kill my cav. So they're going to have to walk forward as a unit, and that means they can really only walk forward in one direction. If they spread out, again, if they spread out in like small groups, let's say like 2 infantry and a cav, 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 something like that, slingers in support across the entire line, that's never going to work, because I can always run away in a few places, and again, engage with more cavalry in a certain place where they don't have enough support. I can just charge their cav, win in that area while I'm just running away, so they have to stay together. And when they stay together, let's say they attack this way, so they're taking... Well, no, they should really attack this way. But let's say they're attacking this way. It's not really a big difference. They have to move this way. They can run, but if they run, they're going to get tired faster. My slingers all have resistance to fatigue. My cavalry is not going to be running very much. So let's say they walk all the way over here and run only when they're in range. It's probably the best decision to save your stamina. I'm going to see that shift happening. These units are going to... Oops. These units are going to run forward. They're going to start surrounding. We're going to be in position to get shots. And we're just going to shoot them as they run this way. We're going to shoot them, shoot them, shoot them. These are going to become rear shots as they get closer. Of course, I'm not going to sit here and let his entire army fight for my units. These guys are just going to run away. And so this is what being wide is so good for. You're going to be getting flanking attacks. You're going to be getting surrounding happening. And that's just going to make your enemy scared. And it's going to have you be doing more damage. So overall, very useful in general. So yeah, it's just a small demonstration. Kind of hard without having an opponent, but I can actually show a replay of that. Hopefully I have it saved. But let's see. I don't know. I have one at least. Well, it'll be good enough. But I'd rather have a different one. These replays are taking a bit to load. There. Maybe I don't. Oh yeah, I do. Oh no, I don't. Okay, well this is gonna have to be. So here's like a perfect example. I don't even have a huge cavalry advantage, but I have a huge slinger advantage. So let's roll with that. So yeah, this was a game that I played on stream a while ago. But let's look at the army. It's not even that cavalry heavy. So in reality, I would have even more cav. But I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 slingers, 4 Thessalians, 1 Hellenic Royal Cav, 3 Tarentines. So yeah, I also have 8 cav, not a small amount. And my opponent here has 1, 2, 3, 4 Thessalians, 1 Companion, and 2 Jav Cav, a Thracian, and a Tarentine. So I have a small cavalry advantage. But he only has 4 regular slingers, or even, yeah, 4 regular slingers. I have 2 Rhodians, most likely. Yeah, 2 Rhodians. So we're just skirmishing here. And you can see he's doing the right thing. He's running out one flank with the majority of his army. These guys are lagging a bit behind, but they're coming. And here we're just skirmishing. You can see I'm not running away yet because I wanted to get that volley of shots. Look at this, Tarentine's already down to 37. My Tarentine's at 57, 60 here, 59 here, and he's already taking fire on these units. So right now, I need to be surrounding a bit faster probably, but you can see I already have Tarentines in his rear. Here, this cavalry is exposed, and this is a good thing. I have a unit of infantry in close support, so if there's ever exposed units of cavalry, they can just get charged by my cav. Even fight, obviously, but my infantry is much closer in support. I have Tarentine in support. All of his units are very far away. You can see I'm using this opportunity to surround and begin that action. You can see this Tarentine is going to come around and put some pressure on that. So this cavalry can just retreat now with 55 men. He's sending in more cav, but again, I always have enough cav to match. You can see I'm sort of shifting my general a bit closer. But here, this cavalry retreats, blocks his Tarentine, sort of. Yeah, it does. This cavalry gets a charge into 2 units here. My infantry is still in this fight, and they're going to be doing a lot of damage. 6 kills already against enemy cav. He's already losing 2 cav, so that's what happens when you get exposed or isolated. That's why you can't just run your cav forward. My support is much closer, my Tarentines are closer, all that. Now you can see the surrounds coming in. You can see his units are still running forward here. He could turn and shoot me here, but then again, look how many infantry I have over here. My infantry is not that weak in this case. I have 2 Samnites, an Italian sword, and a pike all over here. And if he just stays and fights, I'll just start pressuring this flank, force him to run away. Here his cavalry is so aggressive that I can go into his slingers. You can see his general, again, very exposed. Might try to get a charge and actually falls back, which is the right decision. But you can see my cav is trading off very cost effectively against his cav. 40 here, 5 here, 54, and 17. So I'm doing much better in these fights. Now I'm just going to run away because the support actually got pretty close. Ideally, I'd have my infantry a bit closer to facilitate this, but I'll just lose 1 cav. He already lost a cav, so it's very fine for me to just retreat this cav, sacrifice 1 cav, and just continue to shoot. And he's running, he's already active. My pike, yeah, I'm also active, I guess, but I've already surrounded him. You can see his slingers here now are turning and facing, and now I'm just beginning to pressure a little bit more. My cav getting in here. Here he does get charged into my slinger. This is just a micro mistake. Here he can. I'm going to allow him to charge into this sword if he wants. Again, he'll just get javelin in the face. he'll lose more cav than me. And okay, so situation is not bad for him, but you can see what the surrounding has done. He tried to go forward, didn't really work. My surround came through, and now he's just like boxed. He's completely boxed. And again, that's just going to be my shots are going to be better as soon as I can consolidate, coordinate, and get my slingers into action. You see, anywhere he tries to move, he's going to take shots from the flank. If he wants to run at this unit, he's going to get shot by these slingers. Of course, this slinger got molested by his charge, but that's unfortunate. He can't really run anywhere. If he runs this way, the slingers are going to shoot him in the back. So now he pretty much has to stand here. His flank can, you know, potentially aggress this way, but again, my cavalry is always here, my infantry is here. I'm going to do this charge. It's a bit risky, but his Sicilian's so weak here that I know I can afford to take a javelin volley, win this infantry fight potentially with my Samnite, and then cycle out and continue to hold. He doesn't even get a good javelin volley there, so this is potentially very good for me. Seems like he wants to go forward again this way. You can see my cavalry is already targeting his general here just in case he goes forward. This slinger targeting his cav. These slingers, yeah, all targeting his cav now, so a bit slow on my part, but it's fine. Here, Tarentines are going to come in for a rear charge. Again, surrounding, he just can't defend all the angles. This unit is isolated, it gets rear charge. 96 versus 100, Samnites easily are winning here. His Thurios come up and do some damage, but again, he's winded here on his most aggressive units. I guess these guys, yeah, winded, or that unit's fresh, but my guys are all fresh. So now I'm getting a stamina advantage, even better for me. His cavalry, look, trying to come forward, just getting absolutely shot in the side here. His general's a bit out of range, but does take a javelin volley there. But anyway, you can see what this is doing. The surround is just forcing him to go into a bad situation. I'm all over him on the flanks. You can see this cavalry wants to run forward. Take my infantry support. 3 slingers shoot it immediately. Yeah, you're going to run away there. Again, I also have a Tarentine here to shoot his cav with javelins if they get too close. I have another Tarentine over here, the third Tarentine here, so it's just completely boxed in. Now it's just a matter of time. Do the damage with the slingers. Javelin volley came in on his general, did some good damage. Realistically, you can see, like, these cavalry are getting shot. I should be more aggressive over here with my infantry, just threatening. I will never really go into a fight here because his support is so close, but just force him to run away if you want, you know, if he gets scared, and then I'm just going to be in time to shoot him in the back with my slingers. Completely boxed here. Slingers aren't in a good position to really do a lot of damage to mine because they're not facing the right direction. They're not really in good formations. You can see pretty thick there. Shooting my infantry, but my infantry is fine to get shot as long as I'm shooting his cav. This Samnite is eventually going to go down, but took down pretty much the entire unit. Forced him to come over here and support that unit. So now, again, more units are isolated over here. Nice shots from my slingers into his cav. Tons of my units. Like, I still have 3 units that have been untouched. And a pike unit as well. 2 of my Tarentines, a couple of my cav untouched as well. 48 here, 60 here. Weak there, I guess, but 48 more. My general at 58. Now, finally, he's getting to the red line, but look at this, guys, exhausted from fighting in melee. Tired here, so this is an easy win. Here, his general's active, so his cavalry's fine. Winded, fresh, tired. And when they're tired, they just can't do anything. His Thracians try to go for a charge on my slingers, which doesn't work. These guys are, yeah, fresh, so not bad. But now these guys are exposed in the back. Here, I'm just putting pressure on his Thracians here, forcing him to try to commit. Here, I didn't get a charge on his general. It's kind of unfortunate, but I'll just retreat. His general's getting trapped. I have all sorts of support here. He does have good infantry support, but I have tons of cavalry in here. I just want to tie these units down so that I can get free shots on everything else. You can see units going down. Here, these very tired Thurios spears just dying. These guys are winded, tired, so they're not going to be very tired now, so they're not going to be doing well. His general gets rear charge. Now my general can just pull out safely. More cav being shot. Cavalry is always being shot. I didn't even use 2 of these Samnites. They should have been, again, more aggressive. And now I just want to take out the slingers with my cav so that they don't shoot my slingers and my slingers can just shoot his infantry. Won't even matter though. So even in this case where I was a bit slow to push the envelope on the flanks, you can see how surrounding is just so valuable. You want to be... I didn't have any... I have 1 cavalry unit and it was a Jav cav more than my opponent, but I had more slingers, so I decided to be very, very wide, and this was the result. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to learn from this about just being so aggressive, surrounding, not engaging at bad points, and so yeah, that's picking an army, right? I had a lot of slingers, I had a good cav, 3 Jav cav, and mediocre but solid infantry. I had, yeah, a lot of slingers against 6 slingers, so my plan was to kite, So I deployed in a manner that would allow me to do that by being very wide, and I stuck to that game plan. I didn't switch. Like, when I saw him tight, I didn't, like, tighten up my own forces, because, oh, he's not going to be able to flank me anyway. I'm going to go with my strategy, be aggressive, force him to adapt to my playstyle, and again, it's just not going to work for him. If he's going to adapt his army to my style, my game plan, it's never going to be as effective as me having to adapt to his game style. So I'm obviously going to have an advantage there, and you can see it just paid off pretty effectively. Of course, it's not a guaranteed win. You still have to play it correctly, but it gave me a huge positional advantage from the get-go, and it worked out very well. So that's the advantage of being very wide. I think that's deployment-wise, right? Picking your army is one thing. Deployment-wise, being wide is always good. You don't have to be this wide, because here I had a lot of cav, so being wide was very good. But you want to be as wide as you can get away with. And if you have cavalry advantage, it's very good to be wide. If you have cavalry disadvantage, then yes, you can be tighter. And I think I have a replay of that too. Of why being tight can also work. And let's see. It's just gonna take a second to find the right game. Should have been against Tila in the finals. No. Semifinals, yeah. Game 1, RDA versus Basilia. We can see in this match, I literally have 2 Illyrian cavalry and I have 3 Tarentines. So, not a lot of cav in this army, but I do have Illyrian Marines with javelins. So now in this case, yes, I'd prefer to be able to fight him while he's in a wider formation, but it doesn't really make sense because if I'm very wide, then if he has a cavalry advantage, his cavalry can influence the battle more because they can attack more areas. I literally only have 2 cav, right? So if I'm very wide like this, I can't support all of these units with 2 cav. That just won't work. He's going to get charges with his cav frontally. He'll be able to flank for free and get rear charges. It's not going to work. So instead, I'm going to be very consolidated. And what that allows me to do is my cav are in the center to countercharge in the center, and I have 4 Illyrian Marines on the flanks to shoot cavalry units as they attack the flank. So, let's see. This is a pretty long battle, but let's just see how this goes. You can see my jab cav, though, are going to be very wide. They're going to prevent his cavalry from flanking around from the start because I'll just shoot them with my javelins. Obviously, his jab cav are also here, so, it's pretty much a stalemate. He actually has more jab cav than me, so he's going to be able to surround me. And again, that's just good for him. It's just literally good for him. Because you have to move around my cav. Of course, it's just like, he has no frontal pressure, so there's not going to be many losses to my main cavalry force, but it's still forcing me in and surrounded more and more so. Getting this Illyrian Marine even out of position, all that kind of stuff. So, yes, there are cases where you want to be consolidated. And when you don't have a lot of cav, it's good to be consolidated so that your whole force fights in one area. Again, he doesn't really have a missile advantage against me. It's 3 Celtic Slingers versus 3 Slave Slingers. I'll be fine in that missile fight. So it's not like he can really get flank shots. I'll just trade 1 for 1 with my missile units, force him to do something like a wide flanking maneuver with his cav and his infantry, which will still work. Here I just retreated because I was chasing his guys, but this didn't really work. So yeah, I lost a lot of cav, and you can see his surrounding really put me under more pressure because I have to keep my Tarentines close. Otherwise, he starts shooting me in the back. So, yeah, if he had a lot of missiles, this would just be a bad situation for me. I couldn't defend against them all. He'd start getting flank shots. But he only has 3 slingers, so this is okay. And then let's see how I engage. You can see Tila's doing the right thing here. He has very wide Celtics. They should engage first, theoretically, or start surrounding way before he's engaging, so that his timing is better. But this is still not bad. Here you can see I'm even extending my width a little bit here, which is a little dangerous. Because again, my cavalry can't really cover these outside units. Of course, this unit's here, but now I can't cover the center, like this area with my cav. So, risky business. And I even get a bit exposed. So let's just skip forward here. So just some good engagements all over the line here. Pretty normal stuff. He's got these rear units, which again are just shooting me in the back. It's pretty dangerous. I get engagements across the line pretty effectively, but you can see, eventually I'm just going to run out of cav. He's killing a lot of my cav. 49 here, 37 here. You can see his Tarentines in the rear going after my slingers. I just can't defend them all. And now Tila's going to bring in the surround with his Pace Lancers, and you can see this is going to cause devastating effects. I don't have the support really to defend everywhere. He can always rear charge, like these outside units. He can rear charge me here. My Lyrian Cav's out of position defending against these Terrantines, so Pace Lancer is getting aggressive in the center, and this is the problem with having cavalry disadvantage. Now it's not over because I know I'm going to do well in a lot of these infantry fights in the center, where he doesn't get me getting rear charges. So it's not over necessarily, but you can see this here Pace Lancers charge me in the rear. This is just not going well on the flanks, and that's why flanking is so effective. But imagine if I was even wider, right? Like right here, you can see I always have support like nearby. These Illyrian Marines are in support. I have some Axe Warriors in support here. My Cav, well, it's dying now, but it was in support. Imagine if I was even wider. Like, this is about as wide as I can afford to get. And especially because these are Thurios units, which extends my range a little bit because they can throw javelins. But imagine if I was, like, super wide here. My cavalry couldn't support all these fights. I'd just be getting overrun in a few places, probably on the flanks. In the center, I might win, but I'm just going to get collapsed upon. So yeah, you can see he does very well on the flanks. He's routing pretty much both flanks here. This flank especially where he got rear charges. Didn't get as many rear charges here, and my support was better. I had 2 Illyrian Marines to throw javelins here, so I'm actually doing okay. This flank I'm getting owned. In the center, I'm doing well. So this is about what you expect. I have a lot of numbers there, and you can see my support, again, the Illyrian Marines, staying near the center area. They're going to do quite well in these fights, and they just do enough to get me the win here, because I managed to hold on to one flank at least. So, yeah, my support was good in that case, but if I was any wider, it probably wouldn't be. So that's another thing you have to consider with deployment. But in most cases, I'd say being wide is just an advantage, unless you're really lacking in cavalry. There's very few factions and matchups where that's going to be a huge case. But against the Eastern factions, yeah, it makes sense to be kind of tight. Keep your Jav Cav on the flanks to prevent any sort of action out there. Easy flanking, right? Your Jav Cav really stops enemy cavalry, like melee cav, from flanking because they'll just get shot up. So that's sort of 2 key points. I don't know if I want to go into any more for this, but let's just rehash all the important things. When you're building an army, have a plan beforehand. Make it a plan that plays to your faction's strengths, and then just go for that. Don't waste units on things that aren't going to help achieve your plan. And in general, that's just going to mean spend cost efficiently across the board. If there's no rules, that means spend cost efficiently on your melee infantry. Or your cav, maybe if your cav is very good. If there are restrictions on melee infantry, have a balance between your spear cost efficiency and your melee infantry cost efficiency. So even, for example, if I was talking about Epirus instead of Massilia, they don't have any good spears. I would literally, let's say it was 6 melee infantry, I'm going for this, for my melee corps. Like Royal Cav Gen, I'm not going for Royal Peltas because they're just too weak to missiles, not very cost effective for something so expensive. So now, okay, Italian swords and Sandknights, very cost effective. Let's see, where am I going to put my money in? Am I going to put it into spears? These aren't Massilian hoplites, these are Etruscan hoplites. They suck. For the cost, they don't have the elite spear, I don't think. Yeah, no elite spear, not worth my time. Hoplites bad. Maybe I go for Thurio spears, but doesn't really make much sense. Instead, I'm just going to go for pikes, because pikes can do one thing very well. They're, pikes, I would say levy pikes are pretty cost effective if they fit into your plan. My plan is like, I don't want to spend money on my spears, right? I only have 6 melee infantry. 3 of them are cheap, 3 of them are mid-tier. That means that my line is in very big danger of being overrun. But oh, now I'm just going to spam pikes. They do one thing very well, which is not get overrun because they sit there and from the front they're pretty much invulnerable. So this means they're going to support my line and make sure it doesn't die very fast. And instead of putting a lot of money into my pikes or into spears, like buying Etruscan hoplites, I'm just going to get better cav. I have very good cavalry, shot cav for 740, selling cav, very cost effective. Or maybe I go like 2 Aspis cav, depends on your opponent. Maybe if they're very melee heavy, like these Aspis cav could do a lot of damage, but I'm just going to go for 4 Thessalians. Now I have a very strong cav force, and that's going to complement holding in the center, right? Because now these cav can get frontal charges, YOLO charges, and flank. Maybe I get like 3 Rhodians. I can't really afford that. Let's go for let's go for 3 pikes only, so I can get 4 slingers. Maybe get 1 Rhodian in there, and then 2 Terratines. That looks like a good army. I have a plan. Like, pikes in general might not be good, but I have a plan for why I want these pikes to exist. Because I'm not going to spend money on not cost-effective hoplites. I need to hold the line with something. Pikes hold the line. That's what they do. So this army makes a lot of sense. I put cost efficiency into my melee infantry. I put cost efficiency into my cavalry, my Javcav, and slingers and a Rodian, maybe for extra missile power, just to shoot up any units in the late game, whatever. And then I said, okay, I have money left over. I have a gaping hole, which is that I only have 6 units. So without these pikes, I only have 6 units to hold my line. I have a lot of cav, yes, but I've only 6 melee infantry. They're not going to be able to hold the line long enough. The enemy will flank, get support into the cav fights. That's not good. I need something to stop it. Okay, pikes. Simple, makes sense. Don't have quite enough to get another regular pike, but okay. I have 120 left over, whatever. Let's do that. Let's go deploy this army. And again, so that's phase 1, right? I had a plan. I'm going to use my melee infantry with pike support. They're going to hold the line, shoot things with slingers, flank with Javcav. 5 shock cav will frontally charge first. Oops, I went to the ground. My shock cav are going to frontally charge a few units that are key to allow my Samnites and Italian swords to do even better. So that my melee infantry units are holding strong, and then I'm going to flank with those guys, maybe flank with some Italian sword support, while my pikes hold the center. So again, let's deploy this army in a logical manner. Do I want to do this with my pikes? No. Same thing with like the Parthian swords for Parthia. They're going to hold such a small portion of my line, it will be very easy. Let's put my Samnites out here. Italians again on the flanks, maybe one in reserve to support any pike if in case they die. This is not really good because these pikes do not hold a significant portion of ground. It's very easy for my opponent to say, oh, I'll just stick like 2 spear units in front and just start flanking around with the rest of my army. I can even flank just in one direction here because there's so little space being taken up. So again, bad. I'm pretty wide here, like in general, but I'm not really taking up that much space with my pikes. And again, we have a problem with a lack of support for these guys, right? They're kind of exposed. If they die, my slingers are under pressure, my cat is not getting good charges. So this could work, but instead, small adjustments lead to big results. So I could do this, or I could even go like bigger gaps between my pikes, put Italian swords here, because okay, does an opponent really want to run through these gaps? If he does, I'll just plug them with my Italian swords, and a lot of his unit will be caught on the sides of these pikes. I can even like rotate, even rotate the pikes in a little bit, shift them. Whatever, I'm gonna leave a big gap for now. Maybe only 3 clicks, because like you can see, a full width unit does not fit in that gap. If I go one more, yeah, the unit might fit in that gap, right? If he like shrinks it a little bit. But again, if he wants to go into this gap, oh, I think this one just, if he wants to go into this gap, this is what his unit needs to look like to get through the gap. If that unit comes through the gap, it's not going to be fighting at full efficiency. It's very thick, it's going to be an easy target for missiles, and a full strength sword unit will just wrap around the edges. Terrible idea. So now my pikes are taking up double the space almost, double 1.5 times the space, at no loss to their efficiency. So let's, again, I want to flank with my Italian swords since they're a bit faster, so I'll put them on the flanks, hold the flanks with my Samnites. And Samnites by themselves do not really need support. I have a Samnite and an Italian sword in support here that can help help my pikes. For example, they can run through the pikes, charge, and then retreat through the pikes, and get enemies stuck on my pike units. Or they can move out to the flanks if my pikes aren't really being pressured and support over there. But for now, they're going to stay here. Actually, I might even deploy them in front of my pikes, so that my pikes don't take any javelins. Again, if he wants to try to charge these units, I have shock cav. Like, he can go for that kind of charge. I'll get a javelin volley, I can retreat behind my pikes, I just kind of get skewered on the pikes. All good for me. So that's fine. And now again, part of my plan is to flank with the cav after the main line engagement kind of begins. So let's put cav out here. Don't need to put any cav behind the pikes, really. Put my general there, so he's safe. But this cavalry unit can charge here, and if needed, like if frontal charges come in that way. Do that. So again, I'm ready to charge here. This unit, the enemy units that face this unit, will need to be charged by my cav, because I want this unit to hold. Because if this unit dies, my flank, again, this Italian sword is going to try to flank around the enemy. It's going to be exposed, isolated. He can wrap behind my pikes. This unit and this unit need to hold, so I'm expecting to frontally YOLO with my cab. Maybe this cab will do it if this cab is otherwise occupied, but this unit will get a YOLO, and that means that this Sandknight warrior, especially because they're Sandknights and they hold forever, will basically not die in this engagement, and it'll hold for a long time, which means this entire portion of the battle is safe. It's not going to rout, because I have support and pikes, which are very good frontally, and these guys are going to get YOLO support, and they're Sandknights, so they're very strong. And I have 2 reserve units to plug any gaps, for example, if he shoots these pikes. Now I'm going to put my slingers out here, just deploy them as, deploy them as wide as possible, so that they can fight in the missile war as effectively as possible. Throw my cab on the flanks, or my Jav cab. Oops, didn't mean to select that. Alright, that looks like a pretty good deployment. I'm happy with that. Maybe I would put 2 Italian swords here and put Sandknight here, and then focus flanking on this flank, or if I'm winning here, flank here, like around this flank. Because the Italian swords are really a better frontal unit, because you want your Sandknights to be fighting in the mainline engagement. But again, this could work too. It just depends how much strong melee infantry your opponent has, how worried you are about having to hold a longer portion of the line. Because if he has a lot of units, like if he has like Barbarian faction, he has like melee infantry all up and down the line, then yeah, I'm gonna have my Italian swords here, hold on this flank, hold, flank on this flank. Makes sense. Again, I'll YOLO both my cav here. They're going to be weak because of that, or weaker, so they probably don't want to flank. But these Sandknights will hold. Pikes will hold in the center with Italian sword support. This Sandknight holds, and I flank here with maybe 3 cav, keep 2 in reserve, Jav cav are behind, something like that. So again, that's how you take an army idea. You get an army, a composition that works with that idea, and then you deploy to execute the plan from the very start. Notice just also a couple like random things. Every unit is max width. There's literally no point to ever have a unit not max width. You take less fire, you take less javelins, your units perform better in melee, you get more charge damage, everything is better about being wide. And again, I'm also not stacking units right next to each other. Like, there's no point in having this sort of shit, where you have units like no gaps. It doesn't work. It makes it easier to flank, it makes it easier to surround, it makes these units cover less ground, and again, small gaps between units literally has no detrimental effects. None at all. Because they cannot fit through these gaps. They literally can't fit through them. So now I'm wider, but my frontage is the same. It covers the same amount of enemy units, it has the same, or the same amount of weaknesses. Like, this does not add any structural weaknesses to my formation. It just makes it wider, which just makes everything work better. So I think that was sort of the 2 points. I want to build an army with a plan in mind. My plan is based in the reality of the metagame. Swords are very good. Shot cav is very good. Melee cav can hold. Slingers are very powerful at, shooting enemy units for a long time. Jav cav is relevant and flanks very effectively, and protects my cav from being flanked by enemy Jav cav. And being wider, getting flank shots and surrounding, rear charging, all that kind of stuff is all good. It makes your units perform better. So that's pretty much all I have to say, I think, about this. Hopefully this was sort of important. Obviously, you can't learn this stuff in a day. It takes time to understand what units are good in what situation, against what enemy faction should I bring this unit versus that unit, all that kind of stuff. Depends. It takes a long time to learn, but once you get a feel for which units are good, or you see other good players take them, or you have that, then you understand that those units are cost effective. For example, you bring them, you have a plan to utilize them. For example, units are only as cost effective as they are allowed to be by the enemy faction, right? If I'm facing Parthia, I'm not going to take loads of sword followers as Boyad, right? I'm going to take some sword followers so I can make sure I win the melee fight, and I'm going to take a bunch of veteran spears because they also have javelins, they're better against cavalry, and they will hold, support the threat that Parthia brings, which is cav, better than sword followers will. It's a fact. So every unit that's cost effective has its positions or strengths, places where it will perform well. It's your, obligation as the commander to pick the right army for the situation, to play it in a way that will make sure that no units are not performing at their peak or as best as they can. Of course, the enemy will also be countering you, but if you go with your plan and execute it, I think it'll be very successful in general. So hopefully this was useful. Kind of went on a bit of a rambling spree there, but I think the points that I wanted to get across got across at some point or another. So yeah, hopefully this is useful. Don't lose the battle at the army selection screen. That's all I'm saying. It's so pointless to lose there and then have no chance in the actual fighting part because you took an army that's just going to lose. That's just that doesn't feel good. It doesn't give you a chance. You're losing from the get-go, and it's avoidable. Almost, yeah, certain factions have a lot of different playstyles, and you can just get randomly hard countered at the start of the battle because they took a random army that it luckily counters you. But that's random, and sometimes that's going to play in your favor, right? They take some weird army and you have the counter to it because that's just the idea you had, and it works very well against the enemy army. That shit's random. I mean, don't bring an army that just makes no sense and will lose to any logical army from your opponent's faction. Don't do that, because it's just giving you less of a chance to win. And then, secondly, and kind of relatedly, don't deploy in a way that's going to make your enemy have an easy time. Make your units wide. Make them, make your enemy have to think about being surrounded, getting shot in the back, getting flanked, all that kind of stuff. That will make your engagements go better because you're providing your opponent with more things to think about. They can't be as focused on what they want to do. They can't counter you as hard as they would like to because you're giving them things to think about too. Don't be passive and just sit there and let your enemy dictate how a battle is going to go. Be aggressive, not overly aggressive, but even if it's just being wide at the start of the battle, that gives your opponent another thing to think about, makes them perform less optimally because they have to start worrying about what happens if you surround, and you're threatening to surround, and now you're getting shot in the side, all that kind of thing. So, I think that's sort of the takeaway. Deploy smartly with an army that was built smartly, and that's, that's the fundamental aspect of starting a game on the right foot. Don't start the game on the wrong foot, doesn't really make any sense. And then, once you actually go into the battle, you can take all the tips and tricks that I talked about in the other two fundamentals videos about how to actually make units perform well in engagements. That's another question, but you can't do those steps if you don't have a good army and a good plan and a good deployment. So, hopefully this was helpful. It's one of the keys, I think, and it's not obvious, and the metagame for this game has been evolving constantly for over the years. But now we have the knowledge of what's a good army for this patch and this current theory of the game. We have ideas of what's a good army. We know melee infantry are good. So, use that knowledge, and make it play in your favor, rather than trying to guess what might be a good army, and not really having a plan, trying to adapt to what your opponent does. That can work, but why not have a good idea from the start? That's sort of the point. Anyway, yep, hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. More videos, more fundamental stuff can always come. So, yep, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. And peace.